All right, and we are live. Good evening, everyone, or morning or afternoon, depending on where you are joining us from. My name is Modukwe Oloruntaba, and I'm a Nigerian writer based in Johannesburg. I work primarily in fashion, sometimes in beauty, but also across the creative industries. And I'm on the Fakugesi team of contributors for 2021, helping to shape the year's messaging alongside our new curator, Dillian S. Piri. And as part of that role, I get to facilitate today's exciting conversation on gaming in Africa. So I will go around and let our panel introduce themselves to you. Oscar, would you like to start?
Okay, didn't expect that. Yeah. Hello, everyone. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are. On my side, it's evening. I'm Oscar Michael, and I'm the founder of Africa Communicate. And Africa Communicate is basically a platform for African digital creatives in the games, animation, comics, XR, and the movie industry, showcasing their works and connecting them to opportunities for learning, collaboration, and funding. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Oscar. Dean, would you like to go next? Sorry, Dean, you're on mute.
There's always one. It just happened to be me. Yeah, hi everyone. Enjoying the opportunity. My name is Dean. I founded Kunta Content, making games that Africans can be proud of.
Awesome, thank you. And Lindelani, please introduce yourself.
Hi guys, my name is Lindelani. We run a project called Masidlale. So the aim and the focus for Masidlale is trying to find local game designers and connecting them with our local gaming community through our platform called the Masidlale Arcade, and just try to grow the indie gaming space, especially like in township areas. So that's what we do.
Okay, awesome. Really looking forward to this conversation. Right, so a little bit of background on what we're going to talk about today is that Africa has a gaming industry and Africa has gamers, and they're not necessarily a connected group or not as connected as they could be. And we're going to talk about that landscape, the characteristics of that landscape, basically, and try and contextualize that gap between the audiences and the creators. We're going to discuss ways to address local and global accessibility, and talk about African gaming in context of the whole world of gaming. The whole world, well, globally, gaming has just seen so much change over the past few years. Like many fields, that change has been accelerated by the pandemic. Closer to home, the stats are just as big, the potential is exciting, but the opportunities to kind of capitalize on that and leverage it still feel far away for a lot of creators and a lot of people working in this ecosystem. So some of those statistics is basically all fueled by this combination of our youth population and increased smartphone use, with mobile gaming kind of taking the lead on everything. But across mobile, console, PC, everything, the African gaming industry is expected to hit or register a compound annual growth rate of 12% over the next 5 years. Actually, this being year one, so over the next 4 years. And the gamers or the game industry's main developers or key developers are coming from Kenya, Nigeria, Uganda. So it's growing in quite exponentially in quite a decentralized way. The number of mobile gamers across the continent grew from 1.2 billion to 1.75 billion per month within the first quarter of 2020. So that's the first quarter of just last year. And that's an increase of 46%. Consumers spent roughly $19 billion, which is 271 billion Rand, on mobile games in the second quarter of 2020. 21% of Android and 25% of iOS apps downloaded were games. By 2022, it's being predicted that Android games will be responsible for 56% of all mobile game revenue. on the continent. So these are very, very exciting numbers, but then it just becomes a conversation about how we take advantage of this and make sure that African creators aren't being left behind, and that we're connecting as a community to make the most of what this opportunity represents. So let's dive in. Dean, I'll start with you in asking, what effects have you seen the pandemic have on gaming, good and bad?
I think considering the African context, it's always fun to start with bad. So I'll start with bad. Betting has gone up significantly. There was a point where there were very few sports. So betting took a small nosedive, but very quickly rebounded. People watching fighting, indoor football, indoor basketball, and so on. The rates of gambling addiction have definitely gone higher, but then quickly jumping into games, traditional games, so to say. People are playing games more than ever. People are downloading more games more than ever. Fairly straightforward. Once you're locked down, once other leisure activities are taken away, gaming sort of regains a very strong foothold in the amount of time and energy people invest in them. Of course, other home-based entertainment has also gone up, your Netflix, your TV, your DSTV, and the like. But I think it presents a very interesting opportunity now that our target audience is playing games more than ever in the history of games. And I remember every month has more or less been one of the biggest months for gaming ever or yet, starting with March last year. I remember March last year, gaming grew by, I think, 40% across the world, which is a ridiculous number to get in a month, and only pandemic times. So definitely exciting times, definitely scary times for your average global citizen, but definitely exciting times for developers.
Thank you. Lindolani, could you share what's been, I guess, in your immediate surrounds in terms of the effect of the pandemic on gaming?
So our experience with the immediate impact of the pandemic for our gaming community. Our gaming community is more of like an engaged like community, and even like our contributors. So it's very like social and driven, you know. So the kind of challenges we faced, obviously, social distancing and just not being like in touch as we used to, and all the activities that we held, you know. So it was quite a knock, but we kind of like tried to find ways to navigate how to recreate, try to connect online with our community, and just try to democratize the space without any form of contact as much as possible. So that's how it's been. We're still trying to find a way that we can work hand in hand with facilitating or positioning ourselves within the online space and making sense of all that it comes with for our community, and also trying to engage socially as much as possible.
Thank you so much. Oscar, could you share on this from your perspective?
Yeah, firstly, I'd love to say Dean and Lani have both really spoken well. Yeah, because when you look at it from, let me say, from the gaming industry in general, it has really benefited. More people have been playing games thanks to the pandemic. When you look at gaming communities as well, yeah, there's been much more excitement in the esports industry, for example, bringing people together. And if you look at game developers, it has also helped boost their revenue and all, which is also very important. If we now look from the perspective of Africa Communicate as a community of African game developers, I would also love to say, which still falls with what everybody has said, it has brought people together. It has broken down boundaries in terms of communication and connection. This year, thanks to the pandemic, has been very wonderful. I've gotten to meet developers from all across Africa and even outside Africa. I've gotten the opportunity to join communities within and outside Africa. I mean, virtual events would have been a no-no for most people, but because of the pandemic, we are all here talking with one another. And so bridging that gap in communication, forcing people to go out of that comfort zone of physical interaction to actual online collaboration is something that the pandemic has done. And as it has affected all other industries, it has affected the game industry. Also, yeah, positively and negatively, but more positively. Yeah.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus across so many different types of entertainment that you can sit down at a desk or on a couch or with your phone to do. Things have really grown exponentially. And I think we're in for an interesting future as life starts to even out, and we've developed these new habits, but we have old options back, and it should be a very interesting mix going forward. Staying with you, Oscar, how would you characterize the gaming industry across Africa right now? What's your perspective on what the landscape looks like after all of this growth and opportunity, not on the other side of the pandemic, but close to it? Fingers crossed.
Yeah, I think there is a rebirth in the industry, and that's something very important that I've been trying to get people to see. The last decade, if you look at the African game industry, there has been lots of activities following a different strategy, targeting a different customer base. You get the idea. As early as 2010, for example, you're most likely trying to sell to millennials. But right now, you're most likely trying to sell to Gen Z. You get the idea. And these guys are a wonderful class of individuals. They actually pay for online stuff, which the former generation struggled with. You get the idea. So it's been really, really interesting, and I see a rebirth. I see the industry trying to come back from where it was to actually do lots of amazing stuff. And that's really cool because if you look at studios like Kiro Games, for example, in Cameroon, they have an exciting strategy. If you check Games Industry Africa, you'll see there's a recent article of them getting up to 11,000 or 20,000 downloads with their new strategy. So they came up with something new, looking at the change in the ecosystem to target this people. If you look at Virago Games, they have about 300,000 followers on TikTok. A decade ago, nobody was trying to push their games on TikTok. So there are new dynamics right now, and it's really exciting. And we also have much more new studios coming up, reaching out for new collaboration, and that is exciting. That is really exciting. So yeah, I think that's high tech. There's a rebirth in the industry, and I'm excited to be a part of it.
Awesome. Dean, do you have anything to add on kind of where gaming is right now in Africa?
Yeah, I love that Oscar has mentioned those studios, because even at Kunta, we look at some of the work other studios are doing, and we are truly inspired. The monetization options that Kiro Games are doing are very exciting. I think the most, for us especially, the most exciting thing is that you have a lot of really young developers coming up who are truly challenging the status quo, who are really doing far out there games. For example, we had a game development hangout a few weeks ago in Nairobi, and we saw some truly next level games. We had games that were made in the mold of Skyrim, others were made in the mold of Doom, others made in the mold of Subway Surfer, and so on. And we have developers who, for the most part, partly because of their youth, don't really care that much about what the industry says you're supposed to do. They're more focused on making the type of games they want to make. Technology and engines are at a state where it is very easy for a solo developer to make a really good game on their own. And I think we are sort of just before the explosion where over the next 5 years we'll have anywhere from 5 to 50 games hitting over 100,000 downloads, 1 million downloads, and I think most importantly, of Africans playing their own games, of Africans experiencing their own games, experiencing their own stories. I think that's truly the most exciting thing, because in the past, certain small developer communities mostly focused on the Western market. So you'd find there's some truly successful studios from South Africa, but they're mostly focused on the American market. Some amazing studios from Nigeria, even Kenya and Morocco, but they're focused on the European market, sometimes even Asian market. But we're truly getting to a point that an African studio can sustain itself on making games for Africans. And in the past, this has happened in other categories of entertainment. From movies, you have your Nigerian Oga movies, you have your South African dramas. I was very happy at that one. That were truly built for the local audience, for the local economy. And then at some point stretched past that. But in games, it sort of happened the other way. And it's exciting that more and more Africans are getting a chance to play their own games and also are proud of their own games, are able to benchmark them against the best in the world, so to say.
Yeah, it's an incredibly exciting time.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that gap between audiences and creators that we've kind of touched on already in your answer. Sorry, there's a little bit of feedback. I'm not sure where that's coming from. But yeah, let's talk about that gap between African audiences and African creators on the continent within gaming. And the fact that we have some games, we have games that are fresh and green and still in development. We have games that are really world-class competitive level. We have everything in between, but we're not really playing them, even when gamers as a community, both creators and players, tend to be first movers on all kinds of independent development, community-led development, etc. So I want to know from you, what do you think fuels this gap? Why is it there and why does it stay there? And because he's doing work specifically aimed at closing that gap, I want to talk to Lindelani first about this question. Lindelani?
Sure.
Yeah, so what do you think fuels the gap? Why is it there? Why does it stay there? What's keeping this gap between audiences and creators going?
In my observation, I think the gaps are wide because I think firstly that the creators, when they create, right, I think they create from admiring a world where they're looking from like first world countries, first and foremost, you know. So I think that kind of like hinders their ability to see their immediate surroundings and how the people in their immediate surroundings can kind of like access the kinds of projects or games they create. So at times you find games that are very that need like I would say games that need like data, for example, or that need Wi-Fi, you know, for users to engage, whereas the children or the kids or like a very huge number or demographic of people who might be interested to play in those kind of like don't have, let's say, cellular devices or don't have, you know. So I feel as if it's that it's the gap always seems to be like the like those barriers of entries, like, you know, consoles or Wi-Fi, you know. Whereas I feel as if they can try to do they can try still create and still push their ideas, and also just try to at the same time always have in mind that this is the kind of communities that they are close, that they're kind of like have a close proximity to, and they can kind of like help them by creating games that are compatible for tools or for more accessible, like accessible like ways for people to engage. So I feel as if that has been like one of the most prevalent gaps. Also, I think it's just a communication thing. So I think people don't necessarily know that in communities, more especially mine, like younger people didn't know that people could kind of like create games. Like someone who just like who's in like matric or who just graduated high school or who's in varsity could create a game. A person could learn how to like code a game from scratch, or they could engage with tools or just DIY craft stuff, just to get an Arduino, or just to get a pie, just to make basic things. So I think that communication also like just flies above the head, and people don't necessarily know that games can be created by people who look like, like people who look like you and I, or like them, like directly. So I feel as if we're just trying to like bridge that gap as well. And I think the most important way also is to try to make it relatable to them, because the community loves music, it loves dance, So one thing we've noticed is that the efforts from the game designers is that they try to have very smart elements or smart ways to connect with people, whether using um, like like let's say music or sound that people are used to, or they use characters, or they use landmarks, or that people can relate and engage with. And we try by all means, when um, we have projects with Masidlali, to have the people come and speak and engage with the people, get feedback, so that they can always better work on the projects they're working on, and always have the user at the back of their head. So far I feel as if that the gaps they're still wide, but people are still working on them. But I think those have been the most prevalent gaps within connecting the communication across. I'm not sure if I'm making sense.
No, you're making perfect sense, especially
Yeah.
when you talked about the communication aspect of just knowing and realizing, hey, this is an option for you. I remember when it dawned on me that I could make a game like the ones I was playing. I was big on Age of Empires when I was a teen. And it dawned on me one day that someone created this game. And my mother worked in computers, so we were lucky to grow up with a computer in the house. And she had access to like some books, some textbooks and things. And I actually tried to learn Python when I was 14 years old. I did not have the patience. I gave up very quickly. But yeah, people need to kind of have that in their context in order to know that it's an option for them. So thank you for sharing that. That's really insightful on what you've shared on the user context. Oscar, could you talk to us a little bit about what you've seen in terms of this gap between African users and African makers of games?
Okay. Yeah. So I'll touch on 3 points. Three things I really think that actually affects this gap, creates this gap. One being quality, the other being the audience, and the last one being the culture. And I'll use the movie and music industry to kind of connect this together quickly, so I don't take much time. So yeah, the first one is quality. Let's be sincere. In the past years, when you look at the game made in Africa, and then you bring a game made from the West, it's very easy. Some of them are, this is from Africa. You get the idea. And I'm sure there are lots of things surrounding that. The developers have enough reasons why they can't actually produce something on par with their counterparts. And so that's a big thing, quality. It's not enough to just create something around an African theme. You get the idea. if you are targeting a particular set of audience, which is the next thing I'll speak to, then you have to be able to give them what fits that audience. And before now, right now we have Gen Z. We have mobile phones, which makes game accessible. Earlier, it wasn't very easy to play a game. My first games, the first game I played came from those, I cannot forget this. Not now. But yeah, you know, we had these Game Boys, we had Nintendo, and then we had this Sega. Aha, that's the one. That's the first set of games I interacted with. We had this Sega, and then we had these DVD players that had these games that come along with them. Now, that was where you as a game developer could reach out to me. And it wasn't very accessible for developers back then, right? Because now we can reach out to any person that's interested in the game, but then you'd have to go through these channels, use these consoles, or reach out. Even when the first set of mobile phones came, not everyone was developing. It was more like proprietary games like Snake, Bubble, and the likes. So that's one thing we need to look at the game. Audience in those days is now different from the audience here. And then let's now look at culture. Back then, the reason the movie and music industry was able to evolve and grow is because the culture back then supported it. What was the culture talking about? Witches and wizards. I remember my Kenyan friends asking me, do they really put men in bottles? And so the movie industry capitalized on that. And that's how Nollywood grew. You get the idea. We create content against witches, pastors, societal issues, and the audience, those millennials, were there to support it. But when you look at games, the church was against games. Our religious system, institutions were against games. Oh, they are bad for children. The educational system was even against games. They make the brain dull. It's because he plays too much game. He's not passing well in his exams. But now there is a social change. There is a cultural change. People are beginning to realize that games are good. Games help with critical thinking. Games help with problem solving. And that's why more people are adopting. Even now, despite the fact that there's much more access, it's still very difficult to convince some people, to show you that the audience of yesterday is really different. And so that's why it was mainly difficult for game developers back then, even with little resources, to reach out to this audience. But today, with same little resources and much more advanced tech and a much more modern audience, we're able to do much more. So I'd say the quality, I'd say the audience and the culture were things that created that gap. Now they still exist, but the lines are becoming thinner, and that's what makes our industry interesting.
That's very well said. Thank you, Oscar. I definitely, everything you've said has just put me back in a time capsule. I remember hearing that. I remember even not just digital gaming, but Pokemon cards and Yu-Gi-Oh! And everything was kind of off limits because all of it was bad for you. All of it was promoting witchcraft. All of it was rotting your brain. And you're right about that shift, that it really has happened, not just in what people think of games, but in who is being targeted by these games. Dean, can you kind of shed any light from your context, especially as a distributor, on this gap between audiences and creators?
Yeah, I think I'll add also as a developer, just some thoughts on the African setting and African history of the games. I think it's ridiculously difficult, even for us as a developer, to tighten the monetization possibilities of games, mostly because there are very few players who control a lot of the market for games. This is, of course, your Play Stores, your App Stores, your Steams, and your PlayStations and the like. But also what that opportunity creates is if you play the game, so to say, pretty well, you have a sort of path to success that is a lot more stable than most other creative industry versus, for example, movies. There are a few hundred different distribution channels that you can use versus games that are roughly 6 that contain about 95% of the market. So what that does is, if as a player you do not have access to those specific platforms, for example, if you don't have the data to download games on Play Store, or you don't have the storage space, which these days seems to be a significant challenge, then you struggle to gain access to certain games, not just African games, but just games in general. But we are getting to a point that there are more and more games that target the African type audience, the citizen of a developing country with very little data, even less storage space. These are your web games sometimes. These are your tiny bit-sized games. You'll find there are games that are 2 megabytes, 5 megabytes, 10 megabytes that you can download on your phone, still have a pretty good time, still have a really good gaming experience. So it's just as Oscar mentioned, yes, there is a lot of history that is generally negative towards games. But again, the newer generation doesn't care as much. And then our generation that's sort of becoming adults, we have, let me call it, less pressure on gaming activities. We've seen so many children around the world become millionaires from playing esports. We've seen so many games that have made an impact on us in our childhood continue to make new editions. So you have a new generation, both of parents and children, that are excited about games, that want people to experience games, that want their children to play games, and they themselves play games. And I'm drawn to a statistic by Candy Crush, I believe, that counts its audience as 65% female. And this is a number that was rarely found in any other type of game in relation to the female audience. It was well known for a long time that there was a very significant gender divide. But more and more, especially in mobile games, especially in Android and iOS games, all genders are playing the games. All genders are having fun with the games. Younger people are playing the games. Older people are playing the games. So we are getting to this point in African culture that it's not as much a taboo to play a game. In fact, to a certain extent, it's celebrated if hopefully you can find a way to make a career out of it, especially as a player, or it helps your problem solving, it helps you in your education, it helps you in research and so on. So there are a lot of advantages that are slowly trickling down to your average African parent, so to say. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important to note, where I think a lot of our parents playing solitaire, playing Candy Crush, whatever it is, don't consider themselves gamers, but they're being counted in these statistics. And yeah, it's considering them gamers and calling them gamers is really shifting language around it. Everything between that and, I don't know, League of Legends having a $1 million prize for its annual tournament. I think what actually drew me back into gaming and checking out the space and checking out developments in the space was not even Web3 and blockchain technology, which we're going to talk about in a second, but it was fashion getting in on esports. Louis Vuitton makes the case that the FIFA World Cup trophy travels in, right? They decided to do the same for the League of Legends trophy for their esports tournament. And it was like fashion taking this big step, like putting its foot into esports in a way that I think for that space, at least, and for people who care about things like Louis Vuitton, really legitimized League of Legends and the tournament and everything to do with that. So let's talk about the future. Now that we've kind of talked about the past context, the present context, let's talk a little bit about the future. What do you think are the key opportunities for gaming developers and publishers on the continent over the next 5 years? We'll start with you, Dean. Sorry, you're on mute again.
It's my day. YouTube, don't crucify me. I think it's truly exciting that you mentioned blockchain games. At Kunta, it's something we're actively working on a blockchain title, play to earn, and etc. It's still a bit of the Wild West there. There are a few successes and a lot of danger behind the bushes, but it's truly an exciting time that a player can earn up to $100 a day from playing a game. But what that does is it can easily distract a lot of developers from making still fun games, still interesting games, and still, let me call them authentic games. And there have been other challenges in the past, from play to win to your free-to-play games that push microtransactions and so on and so forth. There have been a lot of challenges in the past, so I hope developers are able to restrain themselves, so to say. I think the future of gaming is looking more social, is looking more like the house party style of game, more multiplayer games, better ways of engaging with your friends, more ultra competitive games on smaller scales. So your Call of Duty Mobile, your PUBG Mobiles and the like will still be very will keep growing and still be very incumbent in the industry. But what that means, I think, for the average smaller developer is that it might be a lot harder to tear away a player from a truly global, large-scale game to come to your small, niche, fun narrative game. It's going to be more challenging than ever, which means developers will really need to up level, and pun intended, up level and increase their ability to get players and retain them. However, it can be said that stories have never been as important as now. Being able to tell your story as authentically as you can, as an African in your setting, maybe touching on your history, maybe touching on your present, maybe touching on your future, and speaking to your fellow African, your neighbor, your friend, your family friend. Because what would happen over the next few years, you won't need millions of players to turn a livable profit. You just need your few hundred players, few thousand players. They are able to either earn a living or pay to the game some okay amounts, and a developer can eke out a living. Versus in the past, you'd need sometimes dozens of millions of downloads to even live above minimum wage, especially in the Western countries. So I see it as there's a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunity at the same time, but the future of gaming has never looked better. And more you'll find developers who are from other tech-enabled fields, the likes of web developers and app developers and platform devs coming into gaming because of the opportunity, but also the ability to do really interesting work. Yeah, a bit long-winded, but I hope I answered.
No, that was pretty interesting, and a lot of new information in there for me. For example, I had not thought about people in other tech-enabled work making the jump over, and it does make sense because it's something that takes a very long time to learn and upskill in. And if you have the skills and they're transferable, and that's where the opportunity is, then yeah, it just makes sense. Lindelani, can you talk to us a little bit about opportunities that you're seeing from the work that you're doing with your community? What are you learning, and what do you think it means for the future of gaming?
I think the work we are doing with our community and what the future of gaming holds, I think for us, it just kind of like addresses the need we had from get-go to democratize, firstly, gaming, but secondly, to also bridge the gap towards information and storytelling, creativity, and like just having a creative alternative through a form of creating games. For firstly, the users, which children from the ages of 9 to 10 years old, all the way to like big guys who are like 22, 23, you know. So we've actually been working on trying to find ways to help them develop and also just get beyond just like playing, but to also be contributors into using gaming as a channel for storytelling, you know. So we feel as if the opportunities are very big. They're wide for them to contribute and also to rewrite the narrative of how they used to access gaming 5 to 10 years ago, whereas it was just having to go to the corner store, have a few coins, and then play the classic arcades, or let's say one of the friends manages to buy a console and manages to play that, or one friend has like a computer where so I feel as if the opportunity to grow is like the conversation also is kind of like unfolds the more we engage with our community. I feel as if a lot of our peers and a lot of the younger fellas, they're just showing interest in playing the games and creating their own games, trying to contribute and collaborate with the game designers. So as you were mentioning before about fashion, we know a few homies who are collaborating currently on a game. The guys are like fashion designers, and the game they're collaborating with one of the game designers who we house one of their games to kind of like have their games kind of like have the characters in the attire within the games. We're also finding like it's a melting pot of talent and cross collaboration, and we feel as if this can allow for more contribution beyond just gaming. We thought that we're just giving like access, or we're just like connecting the game designers we always see when we like searching and going around to the community by creating the platform. But we're now seeing that the actual community and the game designers are cross collaborating because everything makes sense through conversation, through engagement, and so forth. So for us, we feel as if the future holds a really interesting and I would say a really fast-driven, way of thinking, more especially towards how the community also has created relationships outside of us being the connector, outside of Masidlali having to bring people together. So people are already establishing relationships. People are already creating simple games for their projects and for their small businesses by just coming to what we usually have and connecting with the game designers. So I feel as if the future will unfold with more collaboration, with more participation from the users, from aspiring young creators, from the game designers, and hopefully from us to try to always create access and democratize what we feel as if there's a lack of from where we are. Yeah.
Awesome, thank you. Oscar, could you talk to us about this as well? This kind of the opportunities specifically that you're seeing in the immediate future for Africans in gaming.
Yeah, so to speak to that, I would, in all sincerity, Dean has said quite very key point, and I would just try to reinforce that. The future is exciting and scary, truth be told. The reason is, you see, let's be candid. Africa is currently seen as the next frontier. And why it's seen as that is because of its youthful population. And then the population starts. The projection is wonderful. We are about to double by 2050. And this brings about a market. So this is interesting, this is exciting, this is making people look into Africa. However, as exciting as this is, the issue with that basically is the fact that one of the first things I'm being made mention of was people from other, not traditional game development, from other industries coming into the gaming industry and making much money and impact and kicking the traditional game companies out. Esports is already challenging the game development industry. If you look at the esports space right now, they are making so much money right now in Africa as compared to you starting out to build your game. And these challenges, the kind of quality game developers here are also going to be able to make, because we need funds, we need engagement. But right now, is there any multiplayer made in African game after like 10 years plus about in the industry that people are playing right now? No. Are there any funds available to sponsor game developers to do that? There's nothing like that. And much more people are going towards let's play games and make money. Because the thing about Web 3.0 is it's all about putting powers back in the players, in the community, to ensure that everything is decentralized. So as an app creator, you make money, the users make money as well, or they get some kind of added value. And esports is doing that 100%. You get the idea. Blockchain gaming is doing that 100%. And if you look at our industry today, there's barely any game studio going into blockchain gaming. So you see, it's scary because it's blockchain developers that will eventually jump on blockchain gaming once there's a fund available. I don't know if you get it my point. And that is really scary. If you look at the metaverse today, for example, there aren't game companies like that exploring that space. But then you see traditional JavaScript developers who are now working with new frameworks in JavaScript, building stuff for XR and VR. And that's what is scary. So it's exciting because the opportunity is going to be huge. But then there are going to be issues if we don't start moving fast, if we don't start bringing stakeholders together to also think futuristic. Most game developers right now and studios are still thinking of traditional ways of distribution. Put it on the Play Store. We're even having more and more app stores coming up. And some people are already asking, why would I download games from the store? You get the idea. This is the innovation we are having here. But we need people that can take that 3 leaps forward and see that, okay, yeah, while people are doing this right now, the next thing is blockchain gaming. The next thing is selling NFTs in my game. Who is trying that right now? Nobody. But we are reading the news and we're like, money is being made. And that is what is scary for me. But as to the market is going to be there. But the question is the game development industry, are the players right now in that industry, are they going to be the one profiting from that market? Or are we going to have external stakeholders and people from other industries taking that market of tomorrow?
Yeah, that's honestly the key question, and the reason that a conversation like this is being had. I think people very often make the mistake of thinking, well, okay, my industry is growing, I'm going to benefit just by being here, when actually you've got to be strategically and proactively understanding what's fueling this growth so that you can take advantage of it. But you said, you talked about blockchain gaming and how there's not necessarily people trying to sell NFTs inside a game or anything in African games. I've come across an outfit out of Nigeria called Thrill Digital that's developing a game world called Astra. And it looks to be this very interesting world for mini gameplay and daily challenges with its own token, Thrill Coins, where people are basically going to be competing with paint guns to win luxury goods from each other, real world luxury goods. So very interesting. Take on it. Yes, it's the timing is crucial and is key. People are starting to experiment with what you're talking about.
Yeah, so just if I might just add to that quickly, that's a very good example you brought up. So Thrill Digital does not identify itself as a gaming company. It identifies itself as metaverse. And that's what I'm saying that is scary.
Because this is true. Astra, at first I thought Astra is a game. And then I looked a little bit further. It's like, no, Astra is not a game. Astra is a world that you're going to play some games in and win some luxury goods, maybe. So yeah, very interesting. And I'll be watching them as well. They've got a little group gathered on Telegram that I'm part of, very eagerly waiting to try out the beta. So fingers crossed for that. Yeah, staying with Web3 and staying with blockchain technology, I want to know, especially from you, Oscar, and from you, Dean, do you see any benefit, I guess, in Africa just skipping past web-based Web 2 application building and focusing on Web 3 because of the timing of everything? Or does that not matter because mobile games is the bread and butter on the continent? We'll start with you, Dean.
I was hoping you'd go to Oscar. It's a tough one. That's something I think about every day, to be truly honest. And there's definitely opportunity and money in Web3. There's a lot of course, we see dollars coming in. There's a lot of people funding projects, funding companies, and so on. At the same time, if you look at the amount of people currently in Web3, or even forecasted over the next, let's say 3 years, it's still going to be less than 95% of the population. However, just as I said earlier, Web3 and blockchain games and better monetization enables you to survive on a very small player base. So it's a very loaded question. I am quite concerned about developers assuming that technology is the answer to all your problems. Just because you are, let's say, able to develop on Web3 doesn't mean that you'll be able to build a player base. Doesn't mean you'll be able to even make a good game. It definitely makes it easier to get interest, I'd say. It makes it easier to get money. It might be easier to get things going, but there are no quote unquote guarantees. And I think mostly importantly, there are a lot of still bad actors within the Web3 space, just because it's so unregulated, it's so unruly, it's the early stages, that it's so easy to be painted a certain way and stick that way for the rest of your life, unfortunately. If a developer can, if you can take the sacrifice over, let's say, the next 6 months, do a fantastic Web2 game, get 50,000 downloads, 100,000 downloads, then use that as your jumping point into Web3. Why? You've already done most of your lessons. You already have built a sort of foundation under yourself, and you can potentially execute better in Web3. But if you are the cowboys among us and you're willing to go to the wilderness and fight the buffaloes and figure it out, be my guest. It's just still quite risky, especially from a result standpoint. Yeah, I don't know what Oscar thinks. I try to go middle ground.
No, that's very fair. That was a very diplomatic answer. Oscar, can you talk to us about that question of skipping past Web 2 or building on Web 2 now, even while Web 3 is exploding?
Yeah, okay. So the truth is, on this subject as well, I am caught in between. But then I'll be very frank. I will try my best not to be diplomatic and direct. And at the end of the day, you'll find out I'm not giving you an answer, but I'm making you as confused as I am. And yeah, so if we look at it objectively from a business standpoint, the first question I'll pose out there to all game developers right now is really, who is backing us? Who is backing us? If you look at the West, it's prototype funding, like almost every week. Africa got its first prototype funding in like years from Games Industry Africa. And the second one right now is from Spill Fabric, which is from the German government. But aside these two, who is supporting us? The beauty and the craziness about the games industry is you don't know what will work. Your game might be perfect in front of you. But once you take it out there, the users don't forgive, especially when it comes to games. So, but we need that backing, we need that funding. And where is the money today? Where is the future to money? It's in Web3. So I can't really just stand out right now and say, oh, jump into Web3, because you also need to have a plan and strategy. Most of what is happening out there right now, when you look at Africa in terms of Web3, It's mainly what the West has done, and then they're trying to like, okay, make it for Africa. We get the idea. Oh, there's OpenSea. I'm creating OpenSea for Africa. Boom, and everybody is sponsors. But the point I'm trying to make here is whether the idea is genuine or not, those guys then get money to fund the industry, to sustain themselves, to grow, to try, to fail, and try again. And there's this thing about investments. If you can push your product to a certain stage and fail or succeed, people would trust you more than you not even reaching that stage. That's how the tech space and investment basically. They like founders that are out there. They like founders that have startups that have tried, that have failed. This builds your experience and social capital. And if you look at the game development industry, there is no social capital right now. And that's crazy. No, really. If you ask about game developers, oh, they might know your game, but then what's the what of your game? What's the what of your startup? What has your startup done? What effect? Even if it's failed, what effect? And we don't have that. And we need funds, for crying out loud. We need support. We need somebody to raise $1 million or $2 million so that everybody can push this industry. And the way it's looking, I'll be sincere, because even the Western market right now are evolving as well. Like Dean said, we're still in the experimentation space. NFTs deal doesn't make complete sense. Like, why would you buy a digital art for 3,000, 5,000? But people are buying it. And in Nigeria and Kenya and all across, creatives have been removed from poverty through it. And look at the environmental implications, because I work in the area of sustainability and circular economy. And that's one thing that is really holding me back. You look at the amount of energy that is being used, you look at the environmental effects, but then it's more like also like a pencil and paper problem. People still use paper, people still use pencil. That's why the fact that we're cutting trees and NFTs are bad. But the point is, who would support this people? Who would support these creatives? And this is the future. Nobody has figured it out. There's no one organization that knows, oh, this is how it will look like. And people are solving problems from all areas. And it is this problem solving, I think, and I believe, if we look at it clearly, that is being funded. It's not the idea. Astra, for example, no one knows it would work. There has never been an Astra before. So it's a complete risk everybody's taking. And why are they investing in Trill Digital? It's because it's the future. And so if there will be environmental issues, if there will be legal issues, the investors and everybody supporting that dream has that faith that when that bridge comes, we would cross it, we would face it. So if you can, I think you should jump on the train. Be cautious, of course, think about your environment, know that whatever you do has a far-reaching effect. Whether it's a Web 2 game or Web 3 game, games have the power of shaping ideas, culture, behaviors. And so we need to also be socially responsible. But if you can, if you have the resources, if you have the idea, don't just jump into Web3 because it's Web3. You would most likely not get any funding. There are lots of shit coins, as they are called, out there. You get the idea. So you also need to move in with strategy. If you can, please go. And if you can't, then work with what you have. But also realize that right now, there is a bubble. And once that bubble stabilizes, where you are is not a comfort zone at all. Because the world is moving forward. And no matter how bad we say, for me personally, I think the blockchain is the future. I strongly believe in that. So right now, most of us holding it back because some things are uncertain. But whether we like it or not, in the next 20 years, once renewable energy is much more feasible and cheap, once all these issues have been sorted out, that's what we would all be working with. There is no going back. That's the beauty of life. I believe you're as confused as I am.
No, that's really well put. I'm just thinking about when you talked about user unpredictability and not knowing whether something will work or not. It just took me back to the Among Us craze that just owned the whole world for a few months. But yeah, when you talk about Web3 being the Wild West or things being unpredictable, I really think you're right in it being a tool right now that we are learning how to use, basically. All of my engagement with it so far has been about that. It's about, okay, this is a tool, what's my use case? And I think going into it right now, a lot of people across, even outside of gaming, just all Web3's applications for the different industries that we have, for different fields. Yeah, everything is really, really experimental right now. And it's a learning process. It's a research and development phase. But yeah, good luck to the Cowboys who want to take everything on. Right, so we come to our big question. We have one audience question that I'm going to get to right after this. But if you can answer this, all three of you, as simply as you can. We come to our big question of getting Africans to play homegrown games. And when I talked to Dillian about this, I first was talking about, okay, how do we get Africans to play homegrown games? We've talked a little bit about that tonight. But there's also the question, I think, of getting the world playing our games like they do work in development from any other region. I want to know from you guys, do you think one can happen without the other? How do you see the two as being connected? Do you think that is it a question of saying the world will play our games if we play our games? We'll start with you, Oscar.
Okay, now I think the table shifted. I was hoping it would be dim. But yeah, okay. So I think there are many things I can say, but there's only one thing that really stands above all and makes sense to me. And that's focus on quality. Like really, focus on quality. In the past, the social behavior of most Africans is, oh, whatever is trending in the West will easily trend there. You get the idea. But if you go deep, there's this, in design thinking, there's this framework we use when you ask the 5 whys. So why? When you answer that question, you ask why again and why, and it gives you the root cause, root problem analysis. If you go deep, it will fall down on quality. And I think that's it. It's no more a matter of, oh, if the West people plays our games, then Africans will play our games. That will most likely happen. But then we've also seen that because Africans love our music, Afrobeats and Afrofusion has gone global. You get the idea? And the only thing that is common in between both is quality. The quality of games from outside is far better than the quality of games produced in India. And then when you look at Afrobeats, you can't produce it anywhere but from Africa, and the quality is dope. And the reason why Africans love what the West love is because of the quality as well. So to make it short, just as you said, focus on quality, and I think you'll get both markets. Just to wow your audience, give them that aha moment. Let them see your game and be like, this was made in Africa. This was good. We don't even need to use that this was made in Africa term. That's really like even bringing us back. But just give them that aha moment that when somebody interacts with your game, their mind is blown. And yeah, quality. Oscar out.
Thank you so much. Lindelani, can you talk to us about this? About how Africa fits into the world, basically, in terms of gaming?
I think Africa fits into the world in terms of gaming. Firstly, I'd like to agree with what Oscar was saying. I think my thoughts are quite similar to how he explained it more towards the Afrobeat analogy. I think it can fit in firstly by us just having to play our games, but secondly, working on improving them, and firstly, obviously quality, but secondly, with also narrative. I think that the stronger the narrative, I think we definitely do have a stronger narrative if you can just refine it within the user experience, the interactions, and the quality. I think that will just like take it over the roof. But I think one more thing, is that we just have to try to engage with people from the diaspora. Just linking it back to how Oscar spoke about Afrobeats, is because I think the way even Afrobeats was exported into other parts of the world and how it became like a global sensation was because the people, let's say people from West Africa and all over, let's say in the States and in Europe. And as soon as they heard that quality and the story and the narrative, it felt strong, it felt unique, it felt like it was something that they have to like own. So I think as if we could kind of like use the same approach as well with the way we create games and connect with the audiences that side. It's easy, I think, for the conversation to spread organically in other parts of the world, because we do have people who are from our homelands in other parts of the world. So I think that's one way I would think about it, and I would summarize it in 2 minutes. I think there's more, but I think that's all I could say for now. But yeah, I definitely agree with Oscar 100%. Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you. And just before we go to Dean, I didn't really get to talk to you about Web3 and kind of the gaming community that you're part of, and closing gaps, I guess, of like, should people be focusing on Web2? Should people be focusing on mobile games? Should people be focusing on blockchain? Based on your community and the fact that we know that it is going to be blockchain based, the future is based on blockchain. What would you say is the kind of support that communities like yours need, that industry needs, game developers need, to close that gap? I mean, Oscar's also given his 2 cents in that we need somebody to raise 1 or 2 million. Do you have any further thoughts on support for growth?
I think support definitely, when it comes to financial injection and muscle, will always accelerate the conversation. But I think more than anything, it has to be, I think for us, for our community, it has to be like education, because looking at how NFTs and now the metaverse, like in these recent months, and the Web3, it makes sense. It's still new. I think it's still at that child meets era stage, but people are still learning it, and as much as people are still learning it, I think people in our community will kind of be like, yo, what is this? How do you place value on something intangible? You understand? So I think the education from there onwards, I think also it just has to, the education and the basis of Web 2, so that people, if they understand what Web 2 is about and they understand what the promises of Web 3 are for, like decentralizing the internet and all of that, it'll kind of like make sense, and people would just like naturally gravitate towards using what they have, which is currently accessible from like the platforms on Web 2, and then gradually going into Web 3, but not just going into Web 3 because it's just technological advancements or or anything that's new. Going back to what Dean said, but I think it's more about having to see if does Web 3 does it serve a necessary function within what I'm trying to do. Will the form allow me to execute this function? I think from what I've seen so far, I think that's the most important thing about people making sense about Web3. There's definitely opportunity. I think it's like a dice game right now. If you like it, but you always have to kind of like analyze the risks and the rewards. But I think definitely people, if they're willing to go into it, they should just be informed. Always just try to, keep on their toes. If they're willing to take the risks, that's the risk comes with 50-50. But I think the most important thing about our community and the support we would just need is just having to understand the basis and understanding fully comprehending how Web 2 and what Web 2 helps us and how it improves our lives and what we do right now. And then if that basis is like fully established, I think it would make sense for them to introduce the Web 3 to them, whether they just want to take the risk or if they just willing to use Web 3 as a tool which will allow their function to progress forward. I think that's my 2 cents about the Web 3 question here.
Thank you so much, Lindelani. This conversation is too interesting for its own good, actually. We're going to run slightly over time here. But Dean, can you answer our final question as well about the connection between Africans playing their own games and the world playing African games?
Sorry to take a lot. I'd like to jump back into the Web3 just for a second. Just one thing for developers to think about. Your traditional games have had at least a minimum of about 12 years of being developed, especially your mobile games. Your PC and console games have at least 20 plus years. So that's a lot of history, that's a lot of technical know-how that is a foundation for you to build on top of. Web3, NFT, play-to-earn games have about 4, 5, 6 months at the most, maybe a few more if you count the fast guys. So from a technical standpoint, it is a lot more difficult than it seems. And a lot of people don't mention the inner workings, from the server costs to the blockchain difficulty to working with your own platform, because there's no Google Play Store for blockchain games. It's you and your website. It's you and the world. It's you and the hackers. It's you and versus everyone. It's just you. So that's really important to consider. On Africans versus the world, I find it difficult. Oscar, why are you laughing? Africans versus the world.
I think he's laughing because you make it sound like we're in a fight.
But unfortunately, we sort of are. If you assume resources are limited, if we assume you can only really target one or the other, it becomes a very critical question. I think it's really difficult to be celebrated, quote unquote, abroad if you haven't figured it out at home. Now, yes, everyone says, oh, our athletes have to go to an Olympics to be celebrated, etc. But for you to get to the Olympics, you have to win your regional trial, you have to win country trial, then finally go to the world. So by the same thought process, try to make the best game that you can for your village. Just start with your village, the best game in your village. Then extend it to your county or region. Make the best game possible. Then maybe do for your country. Then do for your sector of Africa. So maybe East Africa, South Africa, etc. Then go towards the best game you can for Africa. Then try to fight the rest of the world. Because there is, I think, so many advantages in thinking of it that way, in that there's generally so little competition in each of those segments that you can very quickly step out. If you are to think of the best games, let's say from North America, there are at least 1.7 million games. You're just a very small drop in a big sea. But in Africa, there are about 300 to 500 games made on the whole continent, which means it's a lot easier to stand out. It's a lot easier to get noticed. At the same time, it's a much smaller pond. So win your small pond as you grow to the bigger one. However, there are some developers who've just jumped, as I said earlier, into the Western markets. But that needs a whole other level of focus. It needs a whole other level of execution. It's definitely very demanding, but there are a lot of spoils on that side. So yeah, being diplomatic, it's really depending on your decision, but I would advocate, this is where I remove diplomacy, I would advocate focusing on your local situation and then executing more and more towards a global standpoint.
That's very well said, and reminds me of something my dad often says, which is that university, or rather the world in this context, is a collection of local heroes. So you kind of have to be your local hero first before you go and compete with all the other local heroes.
Yeah.
So I'll come to our audience question now, which I'm really excited about because I think this is an excellent group of people to try and answer this. So it's from Tony Soglo. And Tony says, hi, I run a gaming lounge in Johannesburg and I'm trying to get gaming into schools. Many schools are ignorant as to what gaming can do for kids with regards to skills, functional development, etc. So how do you advise from a strategic standpoint to get schools to understand the benefits of gaming for learners, teachers, and parents? Oscar, let's start with you.
Okay, perfect question. To start with, so my background in the game development industry is in EdTech. I worked for an organization, Center for Tech in Lagos, Nigeria, for over 4 years, and we're basically the first organization in Nigeria, definitely, to introduce STEM classes. And by STEM, I mean game development, embedded systems, apps development, animation. So we used to run summer camps, summer tech boot camps as way early as 2014. And the whole idea is tech is the future. And there's one really amazing field, really amazing field in the tech industry that brings everything about tech together: programming, creative arts, critical thinking, psychology. One field that brings all of that together is game development. And all you need to do is, how do I put it? Because it wasn't easy as well. From 2014, we started with about like 10 students learning how to build their first games. But then those 10 students became ambassadors. When they built their first game, their mind like blew up. Wow, I can do this. And then they showed their friends. And because the parents could see the change in them, though of course, over time, parents started saying, no, he doesn't want to learn his work anymore. He wants to build more games. And so parents are like, he's playing these games too much. But the point there is, this would also tell in their studies, especially if the curriculum, the content you're following is well structured. I know Unity has a course curriculum that you can follow. But game development today is a huge part of the STEM curriculum, which every school, every parent should get their child on board. Whether you're using Scratch, which is what most people use these days as an easy entry point, or you're using Unity or Construct or Unreal Engine might be too heavy for that. But yeah, or Unity or Construct, which I know are the most common ones used out there. Scratch, Unity, Construct. Game development should be a part of every child, every school curriculum. Every school that is trying to get into STEM must have, and I say it like boldly, must have game development as part of their curriculum. And I've worked with children for like almost a greater part of my professional career at Center for Tech, a total of 5 years, teaching games, animations, and the values are tremendous. So you basically move to this. It's STEM. Maybe you're going forward without to teach them how to build games. Some schools would understand, some would not. True story. Sorry to take much time, but in Nigeria, for example, I once ran a code camp on Python, and there was a school that agreed to allow us to train their children on coding. But then one of the staff just asked, what programming language? And I said Python, and that was the end of it. Yes, and this was as early as 2017. So the truth of the matter is there is that school out there, that first user that you would start with. So look for that school and start with them. And then the others will get on the train. Once they see, and so you must also make sure your program has objective, has deliverables that can be tracked, expected outcomes that can be tracked, has impact that can be monitored. That's very important because for us, at the end of each program, the students come out with their games. They're able to articulate what they've learned, what they did, how they did it, and even speak about their future. And one very important thing also is you should also know that it's not a mission to get everybody to become game developers, but to get people to realize they are problem solvers. So in the education space, it's really tricky because there's this traditional beliefs from our past with parents saying, oh, games are a waste of time. There are parents out there that know that games are important, but it's possible, and your first school is out there waiting for you. So please go and look for that school. Yeah.
That's very well said. Thank you so much, Oscar. Lindelani, I'll go to you as someone who is leading and facilitating community engagement. You've probably, with the kids that you're working with in the arcade, had to answer some parents' questions. How have you gone about that, and how might that help Tony in his situation?
With engaging with the parents, I think generally, like, people this side, it's more of like they just want to engage with what the children or the community is interested with, like, as so far as like the parents, only if it's during their spare time. So similar to what Oscar was saying, they feel as if it's not fundamental within their time when they have to do homework, or when they have to do, like, but it's not seen as like an extracurricular activity. I think also with that, there's still more work to be done. The very same problem that Tony identified with schools not seeing it as a as an approach, as a way, or taking it seriously, to introduce it into like curriculum, and to actually have it more within what children do, and how to problem solve through what they like. I think it's just that there's a gap, because the gap just so happens that within schools that within, let's say, a certain income bracket, have the privilege of having that kind of curricula, whereas, let's say, schools outside don't. So it's just trying to make sense and trying to cross collaborate, because even within the space we have, there's some kids who go to some schools where they teach them how to code using the smart board from school, or using their iPads, whereas there's some kids who don't even know what like coding is, or coding like a simple like snake game. So I feel as if there's still a lot of work to be done, but I think with what our space is doing and what our project is doing, we're just trying to close that gap through conversation, through collaboration, and just like engaging just engaging with the children who don't necessarily have an idea of what that is, and just having their peers in the space help them out, trying to figure it out, as so far as working together. Also, just sharing information and knowledge, because the space always has internet. So when someone sees that, oh, actually, this is how you can do this, they just simply, let's say, go onto YouTube, or just like tap into another bubble of knowledge that they weren't aware of. So the problem is very prevalent, definitely, especially since we are in Deep Roof in Soweto. But we just try by all means to like just spread the information and close the gap through our platform, through the people, and through the game designers who always come and engage and interact with the people to explain how they do these games, how they how they kind of like came with the idea, how it came from like pen to paper, all the way to realization. So I feel as if that's all I could say as so far as our our efforts to try shift the needle of having this thing, having the education being done on the ground, because there isn't as much support, definitely, from the general schooling system around. It's just those few schools But I think that's about it from our side. But I think we're just shifting a needle bit by bit. Yeah.
Right. Thank you. Thanks so much. Dean, you're our last speaker on our last question. What would you advise Tony to do to get these schools on board and understand the benefits of gaming for learners, teachers, and parents?
I'd start off with saying do what Oscar and Lindelani have said. Just start there. That's a very easy starting point. But then I think so many times we try to break what people are used to versus, or try to really introduce new things versus trying to connect with the challenges that the person we are speaking to has. And the biggest challenge that he has probably faced is that the perception of games is very specific. It's your loud, violent, time-consuming games. So it would be interesting for him to try out two things. One, to do, let me say, more child-friendly games, games focused on education, even if on console, games focused on discovery, games focused on history, or math, science, biology, etc. Not a game that you're killing 100 people and then seeing an exotic tree and then saying that is educational, an actual educational game. And then first reaching out to the parents and the teachers and getting them not really just to hear about the games, but to play the games. Go to the staff room, go with the TV, go with the games, get them to play, get them to engage with it themselves, get them to struggle and get them to get that feeling of success and get them to understand, okay, there are some lessons to be learned out of this. There's a big case to be made about coding, about game development and etc. I think that's a bit later in his journey. The first step is really to get buy-in. Now, if he's able to become a teacher and teach a curriculum, even better. But seeming that he runs a gaming lounge, and I think his focus is bringing students into the lounge or taking the lounge out to them, I'd say have extreme educational benefits, expect to get a lot of no's, but hopefully you get a few yeses and you get started off in that direction. It will mean that you really have to dig deep. You really have to look for specific games that cater to your target audience, that are not the most marketed, they're not the most played, but they're there. Getting those games, getting people to play them, and just start your journey from there. Good luck to him. It's not an easy challenge to try to solve, but definitely a lot of dividends if he's able to succeed.
Awesome. Okay. Wow. This has been an incredible conversation. I've learned so much. I was excited about the future of gaming on the continent. I'm even more excited about the future of gaming on the continent. Thank you all for sharing your insights, for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your experience. I really hope that everyone watching has been as inspired as I have. And really enjoyed this session. Please share this session on social media. If you have watched it and enjoyed it, let everybody know that it will be on the Fakugesi YouTube channel for replay for anybody who's missed it. And yeah, thank you very, very much.